This is the story of a single day in Britain in 6 years' time. In the winter of 2010, Britain is on the brink of disaster.
Unless we make decisions now, within 5 years, our electricity will start to run out.
It starts with an explosion on the other side of Europe, at the beginning of a long pipeline that will bring us the energy we need to survive.
Suspected terrorism.
It ends with a power cut, the like of which Britain has never seen.
I can't give you an exact estimate of when this problem will be resolved. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
You can't make electricity out of thin air.
It's a crisis which will leave us all vulnerable.
For God's sake, Sophie. People are going to die.
The next 12 hours will be crucial in terms of public safety and security.
And the experts agree it could happen, unless we act now.
Mom, come home. I'm scared.
October 2010. The newly appointed Energy Minister, Bill McAllister, is riding high.
I'm delighted that my first public act as Energy Minister is to declare Beach Hill Wind Farm open for business. Morning. Of course, there have been setbacks in recent years, but today, nearly 10% of our electricity comes from clean, renewable energy.
He has arrived in office with a mission: to lead the fight against global warming by promoting cleaner energy. The seeds of Bill McAllister's mission were sown years earlier by the government of Tony Blair.
The UK government has a bold vision for Britain's future energy supply. They put in place the renewables obligation. This is legislation on electricity supply companies to source increasing proportions of their supply from renewables to 10% by 2010.
Let no one doubt this government's ability to deliver on its promises. We are delivering.
In 2010, the battle for cleaner electricity is being won. But alongside this vision of the future, there is a darker prospect. This is the story of how Britain could run out of its most vital resource. In 2010, despite the efforts of successive governments to reduce our use of energy, Britain is consuming more electricity than ever.
Electricity is as cheap as it's ever been, and we're getting steadily richer. And so we gorge ourselves on electricity. We use 1.5% more electricity year on year.
Mona Thomas lives with her mum on a council estate in West London. Like most of us, she takes the electricity she uses for granted.
Well, electricity is fundamental to the way we live. We live in a very complex society. Within the home, we rely on electricity for lighting, for heating, for our very existence. We cook with electricity. We watch TV. We gather most of our information through either the visual or the sound media. That's driven by electricity.
Mona, we agreed to the next level only now. Come on, turn it off.
Indeed, we seem to be hooked on electricity like a drug.
Come on, sugar. Bed.
We're addicted to it.
Oh, Mum, 5 more minutes, please.
I said off.
Without electricity, the whole fabric of society would start to break down.
So where does Britain get this vital commodity from today, in 2004? 37% of our electricity is generated by burning gas. 35% of it comes from coal. 24% comes from nuclear power. And renewables, like wind power, provide just 3%. For years, this varied mix has ensured that Britain has a secure supply of electricity. But in 2010, that security is under threat.
Over the next 6 or 7 years, about 10 of our large power stations are going to come to the end of their useful life, and they're going to have to be replaced. Now, at the moment, there are only 2 suggested replacements in the pipeline. We're going to have to do something about that now if we're going to avoid power cuts in the future.
In 2010, that prediction is coming true, and it's making the new Energy Minister anxious. So why haven't we built new power stations when we know we're going to need them? The answer lies in the marketplace.
Buy 'em! 5 bids for 10 on the cow!
In 2010, the traders who buy and sell electricity are busy.
50 bid for 10!
Rumours of winter shortages are pushing up the price.
Quarter bid, 35 bid. I want to sell more! 20 bid for...
The companies who generate electricity sell it wholesale to the people we pay our bills to, the electricity supply companies.
It's a tough, competitive marketplace that is at times quite brutal. It's much more today like a commodity market, almost like tea, coffee or sugar. But of course there's a difference with electricity, and that is that you can't store it. This means that when you're producing electricity, you've got to judge it very precisely to make sure that what you're producing is what people want at the moment.
It's a risky business. Since this way of trading electricity was introduced in 2001, the power companies have struggled to make a profit.
Our market is very well designed to screw the prices down. It's very, very well designed to make the existing power stations work as cheaply as possible. It is not designed for the purpose of replacing most of the power stations in Britain.
You want to do more?
So whose job is it to ensure new power stations are built? A government-appointed regulator known as Ofgem oversees the electricity market to protect the interests of the consumer. But the regulator can't make the industry build power stations.
We have new plant being built, we have plant with planning permission, and if the pricing signal is strong enough, if the market is working properly, then new plant will be developed. But it is not Ofgem's job to order plant to be built.
In a market where prices rise and fall sharply, the power companies have been cautious about investing in the future.
Prices have gone down 40% and now back nearly the same number in the space of, 2, 3, 4 years. These are big swings, and the consequence is people don't invest in such climates.
In the autumn of 2010, years of underinvestment in new power stations have taken their toll. And the Energy Minister, Bill McAllister, is worried there may not be enough electricity to see Britain through the coming winter.
Good coverage this morning, Minister.
Yes, it did go rather well. These winter projections, they're rather gloomy, aren't they? Are we sure about these figures?
I'm afraid so, Minister. Even the National Grid are saying they can't give any guarantees, but they are only projections.
And what is the regulator doing about it?
I put a call into his office. I'm waiting to hear back.
Call him again. Tell them I'm waiting to hear back.
Will do.
It'll feel more like -7 up in Scotland. Do wrap up warm if you're out and about.
Winter has come. Northern Britain is in the grip of the coldest December for nearly 30 years. And right across the country, the electricity network is struggling to meet the heavy demand. Not enough power stations have been built. And despite the high demand, some existing stations are lying idle.
Inefficient plant that cannot compete in the modern market and cannot make a return for the generating company can be taken offline and put into storage. That is called mothballing.
The owners of several power stations, such as this one at Burton Grange, have put on the covers and are waiting for the price of electricity to rise again.
What about Burton Grange? Is there any news?
And that's what's worrying the Ofgem regulator, Tony Rose. He'd hoped the market would coax idle power stations back into production. That hasn't happened. And now Bill McAllister wants to know why.
Yeah. And have they seen the projections? And they're still not confident, no? No. Okay. Any news about Burton Grange? Oh. Okay. Yeah, I'll see you later.
The cold weather is pushing up demand for electricity, and the wholesale price has been rising steadily. So why haven't the companies brought their mothballed power stations back into production?
It's a time-consuming and expensive business, taking a power station out of mothballs in order to run it to meet an increase in demand. This is a very tough commercial judgment for companies to make. You have to remember why the power station was mothballed in the first place. They took it offline because it wasn't making money and it had no immediate prospect of doing so.
After all, the power companies have to stay profitable if they're going to survive.
Generation companies are animals of the market, and they look at the market to see what those signals are. And therefore, their decision to run or not run will be predicated on what the market signal is.
According to this, Burton Grange hasn't produced 1 megawatt of electricity in 7 months.
Well, Minister, they can't bring it back online just like that. They've been using it for spare parts to keep the other stations going. It's standard practice.
If a power station is not being used and another power station needs parts rather urgently, the temptation is to take them from the one that's not being used. Cannibalising, they call it. You could be looking at months, or in some narrow cases, perhaps a year, to get a power station fired up again. This is a big issue because it's no good the price going up to meet peak demand and expecting more power stations suddenly to be brought back to life overnight. It can't be done.
What about Forest Side?
Uneconomic. Southern Power are telling me that they can't afford to bring Forest Side back online just for a couple of weeks of cold weather.
Yes, I know, it's standard practice.
Well, there are only a handful that aren't up and running. I can talk to the companies, but I can't force them.
Can't this, can't that.
Minister, nobody envisaged a winter quite like this.
Let's get this straight. We're heading into a winter with the narrowest margin of supply we've ever had. The energy market is booming, yet we have power stations lying idle. And you're telling me there's nothing you can do?
I don't have to remind you that my primary role is to protect the interests of the consumer.
Well, I just hope the consumer will understand if the lights go out.
On the morning of the 15th of December 2010, Mona and Linda are getting ready to leave home. They don't know it, but events more than 1,000 miles away are about to throw their lives into turmoil. This is Vyborg, an industrial town 100 miles north of St. Petersburg in Russia. Mona and Linda have never heard of it, which is hardly surprising as it's not known for much apart from the huge gas compressor station on its outskirts.
Right, when you get in...
Homework first, then one video.
And there's some pizza in the fridge.
Okay.
Right. I'll be back by about 6:30. Key? I love you.
I know.
Right, come on, come on. Let's get going. Now, you are going to be all right, aren't you?
Mum, who is worrying?
Good. I knew I could rely on you to be sensible. Key. Come on, come on.
BBC News at 8 o'clock GMT on Wednesday the 15th of December 2010. We're getting unconfirmed reports of a major explosion at an industrial installation in northern Russia. Eyewitnesses report seeing a large fireball lighting up the sky near the town of Vyborg, north of St. Petersburg. The cause of the explosion is still unclear.
It's less than 3 hours since the explosion, but the scale of the problem is becoming frighteningly clear to Sophie Atwell, Bill McAllister's special advisor at the Department of Trade and Industry.
Okay, where are we?
I've spoken to my counterpart in the Russian ministry, and right now he's playing it down. Everything's under control. It's just a local problem.
But we have our doubts, yes?
Yes.
So we have a problem.
Almost certainly, Minister. We've spoken to Berlin. They say they're losing pressure too.
How long have we got? Days? Hours?
It's difficult to say exactly at this stage.
But could we say imminent?
We could indeed say imminent.
Right.
So why is an explosion at a gas compressor station 1,300 miles away causing such concern? The answer lies in the makeup of our energy supply 6 years from now, in the winter of 2010.
Can you tell me where exactly? In Vyborg. Can you spell that?
In 2010, our electricity will be generated by the same fuels as in 2004, but the balance will be quite different. In 2004, coal provides 35% of our electricity. By 2010, that will have shrunk to just 16%.
You think it's suspected terrorism?
The electricity we get from nuclear power will have fallen from 24% in 2004 to 16% in 2010.
1 second. They've actually confirmed it now.
While electricity from renewables, mainly wind power, will have shot up from 3 to 10%.
No, I think he really would like to speak to you, yes.
But in 2010, it will be gas which bears the brunt of our growing energy demands. Today, gas provides 37% of our electricity. In just 6 years, that will have jumped to 57%. These figures represent a revolution in how we get our energy. A revolution full of risk.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bill McAllister's predecessors didn't have these problems. For many years, British coal fueled almost all of this country's electricity needs, but not anymore.
The last coal station was built in 1974. Over the next 5 to 10 years, the existing coal stations will close. What's going to replace them? That's what the big question is.
Coal is now in rapid decline because of one big problem.
In a world in which people are trying to do something about climate change and reduce carbon dioxide emissions, coal is about the dirtiest fuel you can possibly envisage having an electricity system. It's not just the carbon dioxide, it's all the other emissions. It's all the energy that goes into digging up the coal in the first place, the methane from the coal mines. It is not an environmentally benign fuel.
From 2008, EU regulations designed to reduce sulphur emissions will force power companies to fit filters onto every coal-fired power station. That could mean the end for coal.
A coal-fired station would cost round about £600 million today. And to fit the clean-up equipment onto it, which the new European rules insist upon, will cost between 200 and 300 million. That's very expensive. So you might put it onto a new coal-fired power station, but you certainly wouldn't put it onto one of the old ones. It would be like fitting a three-way catalytic converter to a clapped-out old Mini. You're not going to do it.
In 2010, far from building coal-fired power stations, Britain is demolishing them. It is now gas which meets most of our energy demands, but not our gas.
Britain's been very lucky in energy terms. First it had coal, then it developed some nuclear power, then it had oil and gas, which has bailed out this economy and this society for 20 years. The gas has been on the doorstep and we've used it. But now we've burnt most of it. There's not much left. So what we're going to have to do is import this gas, and some of it from a very long way away.
Burning gas is the cheapest way to generate electricity, but many are worried we're becoming too dependent on it.
Within 3 years, we'll start to be a net importer of gas. Within a very short time after that, we will become heavily dependent upon imported gas. Right across Europe, there is a very gradual increase in dependence on imported energy, but for Britain alone, we go from being the least dependent to the most dependent over a matter of only a very few years.
The joint studies carried out by the DTI and Ofgem highlight that there is this move towards gas, and indeed the National Grid 7-year statement says exactly the same thing. But it is not right for Ofgem to tell the market what to do, what type of power station it should build.
News of the explosion has sent the energy market into a frenzy. Power companies who depend on gas to run their power stations are desperately buying up any spare electricity in order to fulfill their contracts.
Well, I don't know when this is going to stop at all, but all our phones are starting to go, so something's definitely going on down here, mate.
By mid-morning, the price of electricity has shot up from £35 a megawatt hour to well over £100. Before the day is over, some trades will be made for as much as £6,000 a megawatt hour.
It's now thought that terrorists were responsible for the explosion, which destroyed a vital gas pipeline in Russia this morning. At least 3 workers were killed in the blast and dozens more injured. Agreed by Prime Minister Blair and Russia's President Putin in June 2003, the pipeline was completed in 2008 at a cost of $6 billion. It's one of the new generation of super pipelines, bringing 55 million cubic metres of gas per day from Vyborg in Russia to Bacton in East Anglia. The pipeline provides gas both to heat British homes and to fuel many of the power stations in the east of the country.
Looking forward 10 years, up to 70% of our gas supplies will come in from abroad, initially from Norway, but later on from Russia, Iran, Algeria and the like. These countries are far less stable than what we traditionally get our fuel supplies from, and that's a very worrying circumstance indeed.
Tidligt i morges eksploderede en olierørledning nord for St. Petersborg.
Menschen wurden verletzt. Eine Gruppe mit dem Namen Tschetschenische Märtyrerbrigade hat die
By lunchtime, the explosion is headline news across northern Europe.
Hij loopt van het gebied ten noorden van Sint-Petersburg via Noord-Europa naar de oostkust van Groot-Brittannië.
The Chechen terrorists who carried it out were aiming for maximum impact. They've succeeded.
Extending the gas pipelines out to Russia over thousands of miles means that they're going to be vulnerable to terrorist attack. If we come closer to home and make the comparison with the Northern Ireland era electrical interconnector, that was blown up in the early 70s and effectively stayed out of operation for more than 20 years. The same could happen to these gas pipelines, so much so that if in fact one pipeline's blown up, then it could be out of operation for weeks or months.
In the winter of 2010, Britain's reliance on gas from the Russian pipeline is huge.
By 2010, this gas pipeline could be supplying 20% of our gas needs. This is essential gas that we use in households, for heating and for cooking, and in industry. And of course, by 2010, our power industry itself will be using a large amount of gas to fuel power stations.
And this fleet of gas-fired power stations is now helping to drain what gas is left in the ruptured pipeline. It won't be long before Britain starts to feel the effect.
Gas, in fact, flows down a gas pipeline at around 40 miles per hour. It's in effect blown down the pipeline. So as soon as you stop blowing gas at one end of the pipeline, gas stops moving at the other end of the pipeline. So the effect in the UK could be very quick indeed.
Watching the deteriorating situation is the National Grid, the company whose job it is to balance the supply and demand for electricity 24 hours a day. Britain's electricity grid is robust, but tonight it's under extreme pressure. The problem is simple. Barely enough electricity is being produced anyway. The news from Russia only makes matters worse. In his office at the DTI, the Energy Minister, Bill McAllister, is searching for a way out of the imminent crisis.
Minister, I've had Germany on the phone. Right. It looks as though they're going to shut off the pipeline at their western border, which means we only get what's in the pipes between them and us.
But haven't they got their own reserves?
Yes, but they're not going to give us any at the moment. If we had their reserves, we'd be hanging on to them right now.
The UK effectively has no backup capacity for gas. It traditionally just relies on the gas